Welcome to another story made by Oracle One. The hum of the airplane engines was a constant undercurrent, vibrating through the cabin as Flight 713 soared above the dense clouds. Passengers were settled into their seats, some dozing, others engrossed in books or movies, and most oblivious to the stranger who had just occupied seat 5A, the window seat beside me. I had noticed him immediately upon boarding. He was perfectly ordinary in appearance, dressed in a nondescript dark jacket, with slightly graying hair combed neatly back. But it was his eyes that unsettled me, a sharp, piercing gaze that seemed to wrap itself around every detail in the cabin. There was a quiet confidence about him, the kind that hinted at secrets and knowledge beyond reason. I was in seat 5B, the aisle by the window, my mind elsewhere, nervous about the trip ahead. This plane was heading to a city I once called home but had fled under circumstances I preferred no one knew. The shadows of my past clung to me persistently, and I was desperate to start anew. Yet somehow, this stranger seemed to know more than he should. As if reading my thoughts, he turned towards me without disturbing the rest of the passengers. His voice was low and calm, but carried an eerie certainty. "You don't recognize me, but I know you." I stiffened, not expecting interaction from a stranger, especially not one who sounded like he stepped out of my nightmares. "I don't know you," I replied cautiously, eyes flickering to the flight attendants nearby. He smiled faintly. "No, but I know who you are, Jenny. You've tried to bury your past, but it's all there, etched into your every step." My heart began to pound. How could he possibly know my name? I had kept it hidden on social media, never shared details about my past with anyone on board. I shifted uncomfortably, pretending to read the in-flight magazine, but couldn't resist sneaking a glance. "You're a curious one," he said softly, following my gaze. "You want to know who I am, don't you?" I swallowed the lump in my throat, nodding slightly. "Who are you? How do you know all this?" He leaned back, hands folded gracefully on his lap. "Let's just say, I've been watching you for a long time, Jenny. I've seen your past, the mistakes, the secrets you thought were buried. And more importantly, I know your future." I wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as some disturbed gimmick, but the unease knotting my stomach was all too real. "That's impossible." He shook his head. "Not impossible. I'm not here to scare you, but to warn you." I looked around. No one else seemed to notice the exchange. Was I losing my mind during this long flight, or was there more to this stranger than met the eye? "Warn me about what?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. The stranger's eyes glinted with a strange light. "About the choices you're about to make and the consequences they will bring. I'm here because your next move will change everything, not just for you but for those you care about." My mind whirled with questions and fear. Had someone been tailing me? Was this some twisted game? But there was something about the way he spoke, calm, measured, undeniably real, that made me listen. "Tell me something only I would know," I challenged, my curiosity overtaking my fear. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. I gasped. The picture was of me as a child, standing beside a man I barely remembered, my father, who had disappeared 20 years ago, leaving a void filled with unanswered questions. "He left you because of what he knew," the stranger said softly. "It wasn't abandonment. He wanted to protect you." Tears stung my eyes as memories I'd tried to suppress flooded in, the late-night arguments, whispered warnings, the sudden disappearance. How could this man have obtained such a photo? Who was he to know this? "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, voice cracking. "Because your past isn't just about what happened, it's about what's coming," he replied. "The path you are on will lead you to a crossroads. You can prevent a tragedy if you make the right choice now." I looked out the window, watching the clouds drift by, trying to steady my racing heart. The flight continued smoothly, yet I felt like we were hurtling toward an invisible danger. What would you have me do? I asked. The stranger smiled, just a flicker. Pay attention to the passenger in seat 6C. He's not what he seems. Your safety depends on understanding who he really is. I nearly dropped the photo in my lap. At the start of the flight, 6C had been empty. Then someone boarded last minute, a tall man in a black cap and dark sunglasses. I had barely noticed him. Now, my earlier unease about this person came rushing back. The man in 6C? I repeated, struggling to process. He nodded. Yes, he is connected to the people who ruined your family. You must keep close to him, learn what he's planning. I swallowed hard, my fingers trembling over my lap. Why would anyone care about me now? The past is gone. The stranger's face hardened slightly. Because the past never really goes away, Jenny. It lingers, and it drags the future with it. It's why you're here, on this plane, at this moment. A sudden turbulence rumbled through the cabin, jolting everyone from their thoughts. A flight attendant passed by, forcing me back to the present. Could I really trust this man? I reached into my purse, pulling out my phone, contemplating calling the flight crew, but then the stranger laid a firm hand over mine. Not yet. Doing so will only provoke what's to come. My breathing grew shallow. A cold sweat coated my palms. I needed answers, but this whole situation felt like a trap. Trust me, he said quietly, just for a little while longer. Reluctantly, I nodded. For the next hour, every glance at 6C filled me with dread. The man with the cap kept to himself, but his restless eyes scanned the cabin more than once. Intuition told me he wasn't a random passenger. The stranger in 5A then began to reveal more details of my past, things only I knew. The hidden journal I kept locked away, the code names of people I thought I could trust, and the secret meeting place where I had last spoken with my father. It was as though he'd read through the scars on my soul and catalogued them like an old book. My skepticism melted into alarm. As the plane began its descent, the stranger's tone turned urgent. Remember, when we land, go to the restroom near the rear of the plane. Do not go anywhere else until I say so. Confusion overwhelmed me, but a strange compulsion made me comply. As soon as the seatbelt signs flashed off, I waited for everyone to begin gathering their belongings. Then, with a nervous glance, I stood and made my way to the back. Inside the tiny restroom, I exhaled, rubbing my face. Suddenly, a knock came at the door. "Jenny? It's me," the stranger's voice whispered. I opened the door to find him holding a small, crumpled envelope. "Here's what you need to keep safe," he said. "Inside are details that will explain everything. The truth about your father, why you were watched all these years, and what you must do next." Still unsure whether this was a trap or not, I accepted the envelope and closed the door. Back at my seat, I slid the envelope into my jacket pocket. The man in 6C stood and moved toward the front of the plane. I watched him carefully, heart pounding as the stranger had warned. When the plane touched down, the atmosphere shifted palpably. The stranger's eyes held a knowing look, and in that moment, the world outside the cabin didn't feel safe. Once we disembarked, the stranger motioned for me to follow him away from the crowds. "Listen closely," he murmured. "You aren't safe here. You'll be exhausted and tempted to leave it all behind. But inside that envelope is a message you cannot ignore." We ducked into a quiet corner of the airport terminal. I unsealed the envelope. Inside was a folded letter in faintly typed words. It outlined a plan to expose a powerful man involved in my family's downfall. The letter detailed a meeting point later that night, with a promise that if I attended, I'd finally unlock the truth of my past and the danger threatening my future. The stranger looked into my eyes. "I can't go with you, but you have to decide. Do you move forward with this, or do you let the ghosts win?" All the years I had spent running, hiding, trying to forget the pain, the truth was, I wanted to know. I wanted to reclaim my life. I'm going, I said, heart solidifying with resolve. The stranger smiled once more and then stepped back into the bustling crowd, vanishing as mysteriously as he had appeared. I glanced toward the direction 6C had left, scanning for any sign of the man in the cap. At that moment, the stakes became clear. My past was no longer a shadow, and my future was about to be rewritten. For more stories like in, subscribe.